Okay, this video is about some of the issues surrounding transgenic plants. So if you haven't gone and read or gone through the videos that go on transgenic plants and what they are and how they increase crop productivity, how they provide pest resistance and how they provide disease resistance, then I want you to go back and watch that first, because it's going to give you ideas for what we're going to talk about now. So you'll notice in your books on page 8 that there is the table that goes through what social implications, biological implications and ethical implications are. If you haven't already, please go back and watch the video on social, biological and ethical implications, because it will give you that background and enable you to fill in that table and check it. So below that, there is on page 8 a big table that says social implications, biological implications and ethical implications. This is what we're about to fill in. So we're about to fill in what are the issues to do with transgenic plants. So let's have a look here. So final part of this dot point that's been broken into 4, we're looking at the biological, social and ethical implications that are raised by the use of transgenic plants. So first off, let's have a look at social implications. So what are some of the benefits and disadvantages of making plants that can increase productivity, that can be resistant to disease, or that can provide pest resistance? So the number one benefit to society is you get more food supply, you can get better nutritional content, and you can get better food quality. That's a plus. The next one, you can get expanded range of growth for agricultural species. So this means they can grow in climates that they don't normally grow in. Growing climates they don't normally grow in. The next one, so that one is going to be a plus. The next one means that there's an implication that there's an access to the technology that can form a barrier here. So there's a social inequity between the people that can afford to pay for these genetically modified crops and therefore get better yields and therefore get higher incomes. So therefore that inequity, I would say that one is going to be a negative implication in terms of society. The next one is labeling and consumer choice. A lot of people say that in order for GMOs to be on the shelves, they want to know whether or not they're a GMO. And I'm going to show you some images in class and possibly in this video as well that show you some of those problems that people have with GMOs. They just want to know that they have a choice. It's not necessarily a positive or a negative implication in this case, but it is an implication that when you do create crops using genetically modified organisms, that you are giving people all the information that you can so that they get to make a choice. One of the other social implications is that to make one of these, it requires a patent. A lot of these companies patent these genetically modified plants. As a result, they get to control the price of that foodstuff or that crop to all of the people they sell to. So you might think about that. I don't think that's a great idea. It means that one company in particular, have a look up for Monsanto, they control all of these seeds and they control the price of them, and therefore they can drive farmers to having to pay for this in order to get yield, and there's no economic benefit, or they get kind of locked into these relationships. So it's not a great one. The other one to society is that there are increased costs to farmers. So buying the seed every year, because it is patented, means that you're going to get these increased costs. You might end up getting some benefits here though too, where you get decreased cost over time because you get a greater yield. It doesn't matter which one you go for, so long as you pick one and justify it. The next type of implication we're going to talk about are the biological implications. So remember, these are the health issues, the ones that actually affect the cells and the science. So are they safe? The first one, we're not sure, or there might not be enough evidence on new ones, so therefore that is a question mark. It might be an advantage, might be a disadvantage, but that is an implication of consuming a genetically modified organism. So far, there haven't been any scientific studies that have found that genetically modified organisms are dangerous to your health, because all you've done is change the DNA. And if you change the DNA of something, you're just going to eat that and it's going to de-DNA it anyway. So it's usually people that are not understanding of the biology of where genetically modified foods are changed, or they might think that by changing the gene, it's going to produce a different protein, and that protein might make us sick. There are a lot of processes that we go through, a lot of rigorous testing to make sure that these proteins aren't going to make us sick. There's another one here that says that there's a cross-pollination between GM plants and wild plants. Now, this isn't great. This means if you make this is a negative one. If you make a crop that is genetically modified and you put it next to a crop that is wild, so I'm just going to draw that for you. So you've got your GM crop in this field, and along the edge here you have your weeds. Now, then you get your little bee, your little busy bee comes along and he goes, oh, I'm going to take your pollen and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cross-pollinate and pollinate with this weed. This weed now contains, oh, I've run out of space. Sorry, the weed now contains, and I'm going to redraw that. The weed now contains the gene for pest resistance. So now you have a weed that can grow and can't be destroyed by an insect. Or you've got a weed that will grow and can't be destroyed by weed killer. So that is a dangerous prospect for the farmer if you get these wild type plants that are also getting the GM characteristics. The other thing you get here is the cross-pollination between GM and non-GM crops. So non-GM crops are often your organic crops, and a lot of farmers pay a lot of money to get that organic certification. So if you get this cross-pollination just done by bees, so it's not you're trying to grow your organic fruit and veg, but a bee comes along with the pollen from a GM crop, and now all of a sudden you have a contaminated field and you can't sell it with that certification that you've paid all that money to get. That often means is you have to make sure that your organic fields and your GM fields are physically separated by quite a large distance. Now, I'm not sure what that is. You can look it up, but essentially that's one way of combating this. Another one is the viability of transgenic organisms in the wild. So it might mean that they grow in the lab, fine, and you pay all this money for these transgenic organisms. You put them out in a field and they die. So there's a bit of a risk that you take with that, but generally we do a lot of studies. The other thing that we've got here is the health of GMOs. Are they going to impact our health? So it's a bit of a question mark. They might make us healthier or they might make us sicker. The last one is about reducing, and it should say here, reducing genetic variation in agriculture. If you reduce the genetic variation that you have out in society or out in an environment, what it means is if a selection pressure comes along, then it can apply that to your field and all of a sudden you lose your whole crop because they are all genetically the same. We're going to come back to this when we do our theory of natural selection and evolution, but essentially genetic variation in agriculture is very important to maintaining the fitness of a species. So this has got to do with things called monocultures, and you can have a look up what monocultures are, but that's generally a negative impact. So you can see here that there are quite a few social benefits, but the biological implications can be a bit more negative. Let's just have a look at the last one here. So we're going to look at ethical implications. So the ethical implications to do with transgenic plants. You might have a violation of animal rights depending on what you are killing. So if you are putting in a gene for pest resistance and it might kill rabbits or it might kill cane toads, then are you violating those animals' rights? So this is one of those right or wrong, morally, ethically questionable things. The other thing you've got here is that you've got human self-interest overrides the ethical treatment of organisms. So just because we think we are superior to everything, then do we have the right to unethically treat a plant or unethically treat an animal? And the last one here, the intervention in the evolutionary process. Again, what did I say for the last one? You can always write down playing God too. So I'm going to link to this video. It's a really interesting video on genetically modified organisms, and it summarizes everything really nicely. And then when we're in class, hopefully we'll be able to go through these images. So these images are all in the PowerPoint. It's just about the way that people perceive and the way that the media portrays different things like GMOs. So you've got this one here. I'm not going to go through them right now. These are infographics showing what the prevalence of GMOs are. Then you've got these things called Proposition 37. I'm not going to go through this one. This one's for school. And then you can see these people here are obviously anti-GMO. They're saying stop GMO. They're saying all of these foods are genetically modified and you should be wary of them. There's another one here if you want to pause and have a read. Also, you can get out the PowerPoint and have a read of these. It's about ending Monsanto. They are a pretty evil company in general, and I'll go through some of them. But if you have a look up at Monsanto online, you will find that they are not the nicest of companies.